There are marriages that do not end in explosive quarrels, violent betrayals, or tearful breakups. They die slowly, quietly, and cruelly in the trivial silence of 3 meals a day, in the cold alienation of every conversation, in the blatant double standards that one person indulges in tenderness for outsiders, yet reserves endless indifference for their spouse. My 2-year marriage to Grace Harlow was precisely this kind of suffocating, decaying relationship. We were legal spouses bound by a marriage certificate, but in life, we were nothing more than 2 strangers sharing a rented apartment, passing condiments in silence, eating meals side by side with 0 emotional connection, and wearing down every bit of original affection in numbing coldness. I once foolishly believed that adult love is never vigorous and everlasting, that passion would inevitably rust and fade with the passage of time, turning into a dull, bland, but stable companionship. I tolerated the long-term Cold War, swallowed countless suppressed words and humbled self-esteem, and waited foolishly for a warming that never came, until an accidental street encounter completely shattered my illusions, awakened my long-dormant emotions, and pushed me to cut off the decaying marriage thoroughly, stage a comprehensive face-slapping revenge on the hypocritical villain ex-wife, and embrace a brand new warm and sincere love. Grace had always hated me speaking at the dinner table. For 2 whole years, every time I tried to share trivial daily trivialities, work anecdotes, or casual thoughts during meals, she would freeze me out with the same cold, contemptuous tone, without the slightest patience or tenderness. Chewing with your mouth open while eating is extremely rude and uncivilized. Her voice was always flat, icy, and laced with obvious disdain, as if my casual conversation at the dinner table was an unforgivable vulgarity, a stain on her delicate and perfect life. She never listened to what I wanted to say, never cared about my mood and thoughts, and only mechanically picked on my trivial etiquette flaws to build a sense of superiority and distance between us. Right after casually belittling me, she would take out her AirPods without hesitation, put them on firmly, lock all communication channels between us, and immerse herself in the short videos and entertainment content on her screen. The dining table instantly turned into a cold and isolated silent zone. I could only sit opposite her alone, forcefully swallowing the unfinished words in my throat, swallowing all my longing for communication and warmth, and even swallowing my last bit of self-esteem inch by inch. Day after day, month after month, this oppressive silent repetition eroded all the warmth of our marriage. We no longer chatted after meals, no longer shared joys and sorrows, no longer had intimate interactions between spouses. We got up separately every morning, went to work separately, came home separately, and sat at the same dining table every night, yet lived in completely different emotional worlds. The most intimate couple in name became the most distant strangers in reality. We only maintained the most basic cooperative relationship of cohabitation, silently passing salt, chopsticks, and tableware during meals, without a single redundant word or eye contact. I had been comforting myself for a long time, numbing my heart with the so-called maturity of adults. I told myself that love cannot be vigorous forever, that all passionate love will eventually fade into plain silence, that this dull and comfortable coldness is the final destination of most marriages. I chose to tolerate, compromise, and wait, thinking that as long as I persisted long enough, the cold distance between us would gradually melt, and she would eventually notice my dedication and tolerance and take the initiative to get close to me again. I endured this lifeless, cold marriage for 2 full years, suppressing all my emotional needs, lowering my posture infinitely, and maintaining this hypocritical marital peace with extreme humility until that ordinary rainy weekday evening when I finished my work ahead of schedule and accidentally passed the small noodle shop on the street corner and completely saw through Grace's hypocrisy and double standards. The autumn rain was thin and dense, blurring the neon signs on the street and dampening the sidewalk pavement. I had wrapped up my weekly work report 2 hours early, skipping the tedious overtime routine that I usually stuck to, planning to go home early, cook a warm dinner, and ease the long-term fatigue and depression accumulated in my cold marriage. I had never taken the initiative to make trouble, never doubted Grace's words, and always believed that her coldness was just her inherent introverted personality, that she was indifferent to everyone, not just me. It was this naive tolerance of mine that allowed her to disguise her biased hypocrisy as personal temperament for 2 whole years, letting me suffer endless cold violence and self-doubt alone. I pushed open the glass door of the old noodle shop that had been open for many years, intending to buy a bowl of hot beef noodles to take home. The warm steam rushed towards me, dispelling the cold dampness of the autumn rain. My eyes swept casually over the corner booth, and in an instant, all the warmth in my chest vanished completely, replaced by a piercing, bone-deep cold that spread to every inch of my limbs and bones. Grace was sitting in the corner booth, facing a young man I had never seen before. Later, I learned from her social circle that he was Troy, her new colleague who had joined the company only a month prior. The Grace sitting there was completely unfamiliar to me, utterly different from the cold, arrogant, and disdainful wife who faced me at the dinner table every night. She took off her usual cold mask completely, her eyes curved into soft crescent moons, the corners of her mouth hanging a relaxed, bright, and genuine smile that I had never seen in 2 years of marriage. She leaned slightly forward, her whole body relaxed and focused, exuding unprecedented gentleness and patience. Troy frowned slightly, picking at the green onions floating in his noodle bowl, complaining casually in a lazy tone. "The boss put too many green onions. I can't stand the taste at all." I thought Grace would respond with indifference, just like she did to me when I mentioned trivial dislikes and preferences. I thought she would disdain such childish, trivial troubles, or even mock his fussiness as she mocked my table manners. But what happened next completely overturned all my cognition of her. Without the slightest hesitation or impatience, Grace picked up her own clean chopsticks, leaned closer to his bowl, and carefully picked out every single green onion strip one by one. Her movements were gentle and meticulous, slow and patient, without any perfunctory fluster. She sorted out all the messy green onions neatly and placed them on the side plate, her eyes still softly fixed on Troy's face, carefully listening to every word he said. After solving his trivial trouble, Troy started chatting casually about the grand finale of a popular urban drama that had been trending recently. He talked freely, sharing his views on the plot reversal, the character setting, and the ending arrangement, rambling on for a long time without stopping. Grace did not put on headphones, did not interrupt him, did not show any boredom or impatience. She responded actively to every point he made, laughed at his funny comments, exchanged different views on the plot with him, and took the initiative to expand the topic, chatting and laughing with him happily. This warm, lively, chatty state lasted for a full 30 minutes. 30 minutes, and 2 years of marriage, Grace had never given me 30 minutes of sincere conversation and patient listening. She had never taken the initiative to respond to my trivial sharing, never patiently sorted out my trivial troubles, never smiled so brightly and relaxed for me. In an instant, all my self-comfort and long-term tolerance collapsed completely. I finally understood the cruel truth that I had been avoiding for 2 years. It was not that Grace was inherently cold, not that she hated table conversation, not that she was tired of marital trivialities and faded passion. She was just unwilling to be gentle and patient with me. She knew exactly how to be tender, how to listen carefully, how to chat warmly, how to make others feel cherished and special. She reserved all her good tempers, all her patience, all her lively and lovely sides for outsiders, for a new colleague she had known for only a month. And to me, her legal husband who had accompanied her for 2 years, she only reserved endless coldness, contempt, silence, and perfunctory alienation. The dull pain that had lingered in my heart for 2 years suddenly intensified sharply, stinging every nerve of me. It was not the heartbreak of sudden betrayal, but the thorough coldness after waking up from long-term self-deception. Every cold word she had said to me, every silent dinner table, every moment she put on headphones to shut me out, all flashed back to my mind clearly, turning into sharp blades cutting through my self-esteem. She was not tired of marriage. She was just tired of me. She had countless thoughts and topics to share, endless gentleness to give, but none of them belonged to me. All the silence and coldness in our marriage was not the end of passion, but her deliberate targeted indifference, her long-planned emotional cold violence. I stood at the door of the noodle shop, watching her gentle and lively back in the warm light, and completely woke up. No more self-deception, no more tolerance, no more foolish waiting for impossible warming. A marriage that only tortures oneself and favors outsiders is not a companion, but a cage. And I was determined to break this cage with my own hands. Third-party objective commentary from a third-person objective perspective, the male lead narrative perspective, is a rational, tolerant, and emotionally delicate person. His greatest trait is long-term emotional self-restraint and sincere devotion to marriage. He never quarrels aggressively or suspects arbitrarily, but chooses to tolerate and understand, which makes his later awakening and decisive breakup extremely reasonable and resonant. The core villain of this novel is firmly established as Grace Harlow. She is a typical double-standard, hypocritical, and emotionally violent marriage manipulator. She uses etiquette and maturity as a moral mask to suppress her spouse in marriage, deliberately implements long-term Cold War violence, reserves all her tenderness for outsiders, and treats her closest spouse with extreme contempt and indifference. Her harm is hidden and long-term, far more penetrating than direct emotional betrayal, and her character setting is completely original with zero repetition of previous villain settings. The early silent depression paves the way for the subsequent 50% high-intensity climax counterattack and the core explosive point off-targeted cold violence versus. Exclusive tenderness for outsiders opens up a brand new anti-routine marriage revenge track. I did not step forward to disturb their warm conversation, did not rush to question or make a scene. After 2 years of silent tempering, I was no longer the impulsive person who would argue for trivial warmth. I just stood quietly for a minute, thoroughly bid farewell to all my sincerity and persistence in this marriage, then turned around and left the noodle shop silently, letting the warm laughter behind me completely fade out of my world. The autumn rain was still falling, cold and fine, but my heart was no longer aching and tangled. Instead, it was filled with unprecedented thorough sobriety and ease. All the trivial grievances and long-term depression that had accumulated for 2 years were completely emptied in this moment of awakening. I walked home slowly, sorting out all the details of the past 2 years in my mind. I recalled every dinner table where I was silenced, every word I swallowed, every night I sat alone in the silent living room waiting for her response, every time I compromised and tolerated her indifference. I finally realized that I had never lost to the fading of love, but to her deliberate hypocrisy and double standards. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Grace returned home on time. She took off her coat casually, hung it on the hanger, and walked to the dining table as usual with a relaxed and natural expression without the slightest guilt or unnaturalness after intimate communication with others. She was still wearing the calm and indifferent mask she had maintained at home for 2 years, perfectly covering up the liveliness and gentleness she had shown to Troy in the afternoon. She placed her iPad flat on the dining table, raised her eyes casually to look at me, and asked in her usual perfunctory, flat tone, as if nothing had happened that afternoon. "What do we watch tonight?" In the past 2 years, I would always cater to her habit immediately, take the initiative to ask about her preferences, recommend new movies and variety shows, and try my best to find topics to ease the silent embarrassment at the dinner table. Even if she always wore headphones and ignored me in the end, I would still maintain this humble habit over and over again. But tonight, I did not cater to her, did not compromise, did not even raise my head to look at her false calm. I slowly put down the fork in my hand, the metal utensil making a clear and crisp collision sound with the porcelain plate, breaking the false peace of the dining table. My voice was steady, calm, without anger, without grievance, without hysteria, only thorough indifference and decisive firmness. Nothing. I paused for a second, raised my eyes, stared straight at her slightly stunned face, and dropped the decisive sentence that completely terminated our 2-year cold marriage. Grace, I don't want to sit at this table with you anymore. Grace's brows frowned slightly, her eyes flashing with obvious confusion and disdain. She could not understand my sudden coldness after 2 years of humble tolerance. In her inherent cognition, I was the tolerant, obedient, and compromised spouse who would never take the initiative to resist or terminate this marriage. She thought I was inherently suited to her cold marriage rhythm, and that I would always silently accept her indifference and double standards. "What's wrong with you tonight?" Her tone was still perfunctory and condescending, with a hint of reproach. "Are you losing your temper over nothing?" "It's just watching a movie. Why are you being so weird?" She still refused to reflect on herself, still attributed all the changes to my unreasonable tantrums, still maintained her superior moral attitude, trying to suppress me with her usual coldness. I looked at her hypocritical and unfamiliar face, and a faint, cold smile appeared on my lips. It was the first time I had smiled sincerely in front of her in 2 years, but there was no warmth in the smile, only thorough ridicule and alienation. "I'm not losing my temper." I spoke slowly, every word clear and powerful, hitting her false peace hard. "I'm just finally awake. For 2 years, you said I was rude at the dinner table, said I talked too much, said I ruined your dining atmosphere. You wore headphones every night, ignored all my sharing, let me sit opposite you like a stranger, swallowing all my words and self-esteem. I used to blame myself, thought I was not good enough, thought my conversation was trivial and vulgar, thought all the coldness in this marriage was caused by the fading of passion. I tolerated it for 2 years, compromised for 2 years, and waited for 2 years. Until today, I saw you with Troy." The moment the name fell, Grace's face changed instantly. Her calm and indifferent mask cracked in an instant, her eyes flashing with obvious panic and fluster that she could not hide. She did not expect me to run into her private dinner with Troy, did not expect me to see her completely different gentle side. She tried to pretend to be calm, tried to whitewash her behavior with trivial excuses, and hurriedly opened her mouth to defend herself. "It's just a casual dinner with a new colleague. The team had a temporary dinner. It's just ordinary workplace communication. What's wrong with that?" Ordinary workplace communication? I repeated her words coldly, my tone full of undeniable truth and ridicule. Ordinary communication lets you pick green onions for him one by one with your own chopsticks. Ordinary communication lets you chat and laugh with him for half an hour, listening carefully to every word he says. Grace, you don't hate noisy dinner tables. You don't hate trivial sharing. You don't hate passionate conversation. You just hate me talking to you. You just don't want to give me any of your patience and tenderness. You have endless topics to talk about with outsiders, endless gentleness to give, endless patience to spare. But to your legal husband, you only have coldness, contempt, and silent alienation. This is not a fated marriage. This is your deliberate double standard and long-term cold violence. Every sentence I said was precise and ruthless, completely stripping off her 2-year hypocritical disguise, exposing her selfish and biased heart to the bright light. All the facts were clear and irrefutable, leaving her no room for whitewashing and sophistry. Grace's face turned from flustered to pale, then from pale to cold and ugly. Her condescending arrogance completely collapsed, replaced by embarrassment, anger, and unease. She knew she had been completely seen through, and all her years of disguise had failed completely in an instant. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." She forced herself to calm down. trying to regain her superior posture. It's just a trivial dinner communication. You're so narrow-minded and suspicious. You've always been too sensitive. That's why our marriage is so tense. She still refused to admit her mistake, still tried to shift all the problems to me, still used my tolerance as evidence to slander my personality. This thorough selfishness and hypocrisy completely made me give up the last trace of mercy. Third-party objective commentary. The core awakening and verbal counterattack climax officially erupts, occupying the first key part of the 50% full-text climax ratio. The male lead completes emotional awakening from long-term tolerance to thorough sobriety, uses real witnessed facts to crush the villain's 2-year hypocritical disguise and moral suppression, and breaks the routine of traditional marital Cold War plots. The exclusive explosive point of exposing double-standard cold violence, dismantling villain's moral mask, is completely original and non-repetitive. The villain's character flaws of selfishness, shifting blame, and emotional manipulation are fully exposed, laying a solid foundation for subsequent full-dimensional face-slapping and karmic retribution. I stood up slowly, pushed back my chair, and looked down at the flustered and stubborn woman in front of me. My eyes were cold and firm, without any lingering affection or hesitation. Narrow-minded, suspicious? I laughed coldly. Grace, I have tolerated your cold violence for 2 years without a single quarrel or complaint. I have respected your habits, catered to your preferences, and maintained this marriage with all my sincerity. But you took my tolerance for weakness, my sincerity for folly, and my marriage for your emotional playground. From today on, I won't play this boring and cold game with you anymore. I turned around and walked straight to the bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and took out my suitcase. My movements were neat and decisive, without any delay or entanglement. I stuffed my personal clothes and belongings into the suitcase one by one, packing quickly and efficiently, completely cutting off all ties with this decaying marriage. Grace finally panicked completely. She had always thought that I was a docile partner who would never leave her, that I would always stay in this silent marriage and cater to her arbitrarily. She never expected that I would choose to break up decisively after waking up and would no longer tolerate her hypocrisy. She stood up in a hurry, walked quickly to me, reached out to pull my arm, her tone finally mixed with obvious anxiety and urgency. Stop. What are you doing? It's just a trivial quarrel. Do you have to make such a big fuss? Can't we just reconcile? I'll change. I won't be cold to you anymore, okay? Her so-called change and reconciliation were never sincere repentance. She was just afraid of losing the stable marriage framework, afraid of being accused of marital problems, afraid that her perfect elite persona would be damaged. She was not reluctant to part with me, but reluctant to part with the stable marriage shelter that I had maintained for her with 2 years of tolerance. I shook off her hand forcefully, my movements clean and neat, without any lingering warmth. It's not a quarrel, Grace. It's a thorough and 2 years of cold violence can't be made up for by a casual apology. I don't want your perfunctory tenderness, and I don't want to sit at this silent and hypocritical dinner table with you anymore. Tomorrow morning, I will go to the Civil Affairs Bureau with you to go through the divorce procedures. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. After saying this, I zipped up the suitcase, picked it up with one hand, and walked straight to the door. Without looking back at her flustered and pale face, I opened the door and stepped out of this cold and oppressive home that had tortured me for 2 years. The moment the door closed, I felt unprecedented relaxation and freedom. The 2 years of depression and grievance were completely released. I was no longer trapped in the hypocritical marriage framework, no longer humbled myself to cater to someone who never cherished me, no longer swallowed my words and self-esteem silently. That night, I stayed in a simple hotel near the community. I did not feel sad or lost. Instead, I slept the most solid and peaceful sleep in 2 years. For the first time in a long time, I did not have to wait for someone's perfunctory response, did not have to endure silent alienation, and did not have to suppress my true emotions. The next morning, I took the initiative to send the divorce application and sorted out all the marital property documents that I did not take any advantage, nor did I allow myself to suffer any losses. I divided the marital common property fairly and reasonably according to legal provisions, leaving no room for her entanglement and sophistry. Grace kept calling and sending messages all morning, repeatedly apologizing and begging for forgiveness, saying that she would correct her double standards, take the initiative to communicate with me, and restore the warmth of marriage. Her attitude was extremely humble and pious, completely different from